Akinyele. Soji Akinyele is a trained economist, government policy expert, and executive management leader with over 20 years of working experience. He currently serves as a group managing director, New Globe Nigeria, a global leader in learning development, where he oversees technical partnerships with government to build globally competitive public schools and deliver transformational learning outcomes to over 1 million children across 6 states in Nigeria and growing. Prior to this, he served as Director of Africa, Policy for Women's World Banking, WWB, a New York-based NGO advocating access to financial products for low-income women all over the world. He has also served as in a dual role as Special Assistant to the CEO and Head of Government Relations at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Between 2017 and 2019, Soji served as an advisor and technical assistant to Nigeria's Vice President, His Excellency Professor, or now former Vice President, His Excellency Professor Yemi Osinbajo, SAN GCON, where he implemented ease of doing business policy reforms at both national and subnational levels. Soji once led the research team at the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, Nigeria's most influential economic think tank, where he published together with his team over 40 policy papers, and economic briefs. In 2015, Soji established the Nigerian office of a global business research firm that executed the award-winning commercial due diligence for $80 million private equity investment in a Nigerian biscuit manufacturer. In 2021, he was awarded a Doctor of Economics degree, honoris causa, by the Commonwealth University in recognition of his achievements in economic policy research, reforms, analysis, and implementation. Dr. Akinyele volunteers his time as founding dean of Joseph Business School, Nigeria, a Christian educational franchise from the Joseph Business School in Chicago, Illinois, USA. He's an alumnus of the University of Lagos Business School, London Graduate School, Blavatnik School of Government, University of Oxford, and a fellow of the Institute of Management Consultants. It is time to grab our devices. For those of us who want to use our phones or electronic device to take notes, or doing it the good old way, our pens and our paper. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to welcome our first speaker of today, Dr. Soji Akinyele, as he takes us through this session. Thank you all.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Thank you for the opportunity. I would like to thank StreetSet Integrated Limited for inviting me to be part of this webinar. I also like to thank my good friend, Mr. Kende Omiyale, for tracking me actively and ensuring that against all odds, I am here. I would like to spend the next perhaps 20 or 25 minutes of the time that I have been given to share some of my experiences, as I've titled it, Practical Tips in Change and Transformation, largely because, as Madam Moderator said, change is inevitable, and we live in a world that has been, now it's become almost cliche, but it's real, a VUCA environment. And I hear there's now VUCAT with a D, volatile, uncertain, ever-changing, if you like, ambiguous, and now diverse environment. And so in speaking to leaders, as I expect virtually everyone on this call is, I think what will be more useful for us is to sit back and reflect on the kind of change and the kind of transformation that we would like our organizations to go through. And that's where I want to situate this. And because I have just about 20 minutes, I want to do this perhaps in the most practical form that I think is useful to us. And so if there's anything or if there's nothing you remember out of this, please remember these 3 words as we go through them. And it's about embrace, it's about evolve, and it's about excel. And I've tried to, make it catchy just so we can remember it in terms of practical tips. Someone once said that the ability, that simplicity, right, is absorbing complexity and bringing it down into something that is, easily memorable. So let's start with embrace. And what I want to do here is for us to accept the change that exists, or the evolution that is going on within the Nigerian business environment, and give us some food for thought, in the sense that for you to properly change, or for you to transform your organization, again, in the Nigerian business environment, the first thing you must do is to actually embrace the organizational environment. What do I mean by that? I will say it as bluntly as I can, that a lot of us in the Nigerian business environment, or if you like, in the Nigerian economy today, are still living in some form of denial. Denial, perhaps, depending on our political sentiments, depending on our economic sentiments, exchange rate, inflation, poverty, unemployment, high cost of living, and all of that. But when it comes to an organization, a business that employs resources and marshals those resources towards a particular output, i.e. product or service, then it's important that you situate business, right, within the organizational environment that you find yourself. So what then is the organizational environment? I have coined this in 2 questions that help you immediately appreciate what I'm talking about. And the first is to ask yourself today as a leader, what impact now notice the choice of words, do households, businesses, governments, and international markets have on your organization? You may want to dimension this and say, okay, so what positive or negative impact? If positive, what is the extent of that positivity? If negative, what is the extent of that negativity? So you could say on a scale of 1 to 10. I see a particular hand raised, Madam Moderator, if you want to look at that and just to make sure, that's not a question already. So on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the degree of positivity, or if you like, the degree of negativity to that impact? And then you may want to perhaps focus on one description of impact and ask yourself, okay, what is this factor and how does it impact me? Now, but let's try and break down, the 4 words that are highlighted here: the household, the businesses, the government, and international markets, so that you understand the context within which this question is framed. And that context first is to understand that the household, or if you like, the family system, is the origin of all activity in society. Today, the National Bureau of Statistics will tell us that we'll probably have about 42 to 43 million households, which on average have 5, members per household. So, father plus 4, or father, mother plus 3, depending on how you dimension that. And then that takes you to, your 200 million population or more. The median age today of these households, and of course our population, is below 18. So when you think about, and of course the futuristic expansion that tells us that by 2050, we'll probably be the 3rd or the 5th most populous, country in the world, then you may begin to understand why it's important to look all the way to the household. Because the labor force of the future, or if you like, the labor force of the, of today, comes from that household. If you have a median population, a population with median age below 18, then you know that in 1 or 2 years, they are crossing that barrier where they can already begin to work. And, right now, work is not even dimensioned by age anymore, as you see, child innovators, or young teenagers who are, expanding markets and innovating just because of the power of technology. So thinking about the household there and putting it in the context of the labor force, or, the resources that you have available to you, then sets the cultural context of our demography. Then you talk about the Gen Zs, the Gen Alphas that are coming up. And so you begin to understand that the modern workplace, or the current workplace, can be heavily impacted, in this case, positive or negative, by the outcomes within the household, by the values, by the family system that is actually supporting, the population of the country today, which is then feeding into the labor force. So, cultural context, the educational options that they have, the societal impressions, that they have, the access to information that they have. These things impact organizations. If you think about it from the business side, you are then thinking about not just your business, but the experience that you have. And by the way, household also connects to consumption, retail consumption, service offerings, and all of that. So you can stretch it as much as you want, but this is me just putting out those pointers there. When you think about it from the business side, you then begin to understand the context of where your organization is situated, the sectoral context, the industrial context. Today, Nigeria, for all intents and purposes, is a service economy with about 50% of economic activities in the service space. Some of the fastest growing sectors, right, include that telecom space, which is largely, a service sector, right? It's about, internet service. It's about, telecommunication service, right? Logistics, e-commerce, fintech, all those things, services. So how then does your business begin to interact with, in this case, the Nigerian economy in terms of the sectoral context, agric manufacturing services or agric industry services, in terms of the economic variables that are pulling at us day to day, inflation, exchange rates, unemployment, poverty, and how those economic variables are impacting our business decision making. Then you think about it from the government side, in the sense that while government may not be the largest spender in the economy, the private sector still remains the largest spender in the economy, but the government ought to be the enabler of business. And I've used the word governments here because many times we think of the federal government, but it's also important to contextualize that there is no business in quote unquote Nigeria. You do business in the states. So you do business in Lagos, in Kwara, in Zamfara, in Jigawa, in Gombe, in Edo, in Ekiti, and things like that. So understanding the enabling business environment, even within the state in which you're operating, is a very important thing to embrace. Today, we have the benefit, and I use those words carefully, we have the benefit of at least 18 new state governors across 36 states and the FCT. What that tells you already is that in terms of government policy within the states, in terms of government opportunities and an enabling environment within the states, you probably have come back to the drawing board in terms of a clean slate, where the new governors, as you've been reading in the news, are either repealing or initiating fresh policy, depending on their own political affiliation. So if there's a continuation from the past governor, from the past political party, then you may see continuation of policy. If it's a different political party or a different political affiliation, then you may begin to see adjustments to what the states are presenting. And then you come to international markets. How does your business or your organization interact with the international economy globally, right? Are you in a holding structure that allows you interact with a foreign parent company? Or do you have collaborations, cross-border collaborations? How is the AFCFTA, impacting, and the prospects of that impacting your business? How is the regional disruptions currently going on, the coup in Niger and just across that belt? How is that beginning to affect business? Of course, without forgetting the impact of exchange rates, import dependency, export promotion opportunities, and all those things. How are they, affecting your business? How are you interacting with the international markets? Inflow of investments, right? Foreign portfolio investments, foreign direct investments, and your ability to tap the international market for capital. How are those things impacting your business, or if you like, your organization? Your ability to map this out, and just even in just a very simple context of taking a pen and a paper and writing out a few things just based on what I've said, right, begins to allow you come to terms with the business environment in which you find yourself, and embracing that very quickly. It is important to embrace that environment so that you then know as a leader what you are faced with, what your options are, what your next move can be, what leverages, what levers do you have to pull across, these, what you could call agents or economic agents, or, economic variables. And this is, just an ability to keep it simple, but also inspire you to think through, the extent to which this may impact business, again, positively or negatively, and then the extent of that positivity or extent of that negativity. The next question then to consider, and I got this, from a development platform, or if you like, a YouTube video that I love so much. Ndidi Ukaonu is the CEO of a financial service company. And in one of her presentations during a national development fair, the platform Nigeria, she so excellently put forward the case for an intrapreneur, and taking this from, this age-long theory of Maslow's theory of human motivation, which we're all familiar with. But I want to stretch that thought a little more, and I invite you to please listen to her when you have the time. The link is there, and this will be shared with you. But I want to stretch that thought a little more and ask that beyond the self-motivation of the employee or the employee motivation, as an organization, what motivational level would you consider, yourselves or your organization to be? Because again, to Ndidi Ukaunu's point, that the transition from an employee to an intrapreneur, which is a sense of ownership for the business goals and business objectives of your organization, right, is actually across, the hierarchy of motivation. And there you see that hierarchy, being put out there. So, but my question here is, where would you consider your organization today? Are you still at the level of basically just motivating at physiological needs? Or have you risen to the level of motivating where employees see, the organization as a haven, a safe haven, with job security, personal security, health, security of life and property? Or are they now beginning to consider the organization as a place where, where you have rankings like the best companies to work in and things like that? So is there a sense of belonging? Is there, and I know this is not often used as a business word, but is there love, in the organization, a sense of belonging and ownership? And then do they, see the organization as a place of pride, a place of self-esteem, that, they are honored, to have you on their LinkedIn profile or on their CV, or honored to stretch out, if you still use business cards. I think a few people are returning to business cards now. So generally, from an organizational standpoint, how motivated is the organization in itself? And that's a very important point to make, because as you rise across that hierarchy towards self-actualization, then it's important, that the resources and the decision-making processes within the organization are such that it motivates, perhaps the most critical input, if you like, within business, which are your employees, right? If you name the top three, you'll probably say, employees, customers, and government, or customers, employees, and government. But regardless, within the top three, you should identify your employees as critical stakeholders. So as you rise across that motivational process, then towards self-actualization, the question is, how motivated are your employees right now? And let's just add a little close to that. How motivated are your employees, or how motivated is your organization for change, for transformation? Because that's really, what we're trying to consider here. That as you think about change and transformation within the organization, as a leader, you have a vision and you're trying to morph the organization into that, right? But that involves marshaling all your resources, particularly the human resources, in this particular direction. How motivated are they to be able to take on that change? Because the level or the degree of that motivation and the degree of the ability to accept that change is the degree or ability to the degree to which that change will actually happen, or that that transformation will actually happen. So that's why this is important. And again, right, we're talking about practical tips here. So I hope that this is inspiring thought, and it's just putting you in a perhaps slightly uncomfortable position to actually think through the motivational challenges, or if you like, the motivational needs of your organization as a leader. So now that we've talked about embracing the environment, and just embracing first the organizational environment, and then also embracing the motivation, or the what you can call the temperature of the organization, the next thing to do will then be to begin to prepare for that evolution. Evolution here now mean that word, a loose word for your change and your transformation. That in preparing for this evolution, it is important and it is critical to agree that as a leader, the work of the leader is what, we term here communicative leadership, where you are not just only, pushing out the vision, you are actually living that vision and being able to cascade it across the entire organization through your, middle managers, your generals, right onto, excuse the word, those that you may call, the ground troops, right, in the sense. So there is a sense of communicative leadership that we all need to embrace, in a time of change and transformation, in order to effect that change and in order to effect that level of transformation. Now, what is that communicative leadership? There are two quotations here that that basically speak to it, and I just thought, let's put this out here and then have a conversation around it. So you notice that this is a very non-technical slide, because the aim here at leadership level is to actually inspire you to be able to take your own shape and form of decisions towards managing change and managing transformation, even in the context of what you could call a VUCA environment. So this is Dr. Victor Oladokun, a very seasoned international broadcaster and currently serving as a senior advisor to the president of the AFDB, senior advisor on communication and stakeholder relations. And he explains here that clear, and notice the choice of words again, clear, concise, and timely communication is an unassailable characteristic of good leadership. So essentially, in a time, and in any time at all, one of the burdens, or if you like, or the characteristics of leadership is the ability to communicate clearly, ability to communicate concisely, and in a timely manner, particularly in times of crisis. We all went through the COVID experience, and many of the organizations that stood the test of time, you will agree with me, are those that were able to communicate, clearly, concisely, and in a timely manner, even as, COVID was literally changing everybody and everybody was evolving through that. So evolution involves that DNA, or if you like, that strain of communication embedded within the DNA of a leader to ensure that, he or she is not only, saying it in terms of words, but as we know, there's a lot of non-verbal communication. So it's not so much of how you, it's not so much of what you say, it's really how you say, the tone and the context with which you communicate decisions, with which you communicate financial situations, right? There could be challenges and there could also be, good news in terms of financials. But the approach to that communication, both verbal and non-verbal, both official and informal, will define you right, as a leader in a changing and an evolving situation. A case in point, one of the organizations that I worked with in the capital market was evolving into perhaps one of the most complex structures that you find anywhere in the capital market ecosystem. And throughout that time, the leader of the organization was constantly communicating, first in terms of newsletters, secondly in terms of town hall meetings, and reiterating the same position of what was going to be achieved, right? Clearly articulating that vision and repeating it literally as a broken record, just so that everybody, and then of course deploying what you would call his generals or middle management to ensure that that is cascaded all the way through to even the new entries into the organization. And then there were pockets of town halls, clusters of meetings, right? Constantly, communicating this vision, communicating the strategies towards evolution, the strategies towards this change and this transformation, and ensuring that everybody, at every point in time could literally sing the song, of the transformation project. This is very important. So it was clear, it was concise, they were bite-sized. So apart from having a communications department, it is the burden of the leader. You are actually, regardless of who you call your communications director, you are actually the chief communications officer in a time of change, in a time of transformation. Another quote that explains that is from a book. It's a book, but it's also been broken down into articles. It's called The Mindset and Practices of Excellent CEOs, written by a few partners in McKinsey. And just extracting from one of the things they said is that one of the characteristics they found about excellent CEOs, and you can replace this with just leaders, excellent leaders, is that they communicate, right? Notice the choice of words, audience-tailored messages, listen intently. So communication is not just about that one-way track. It's also about receiving the feedback and listening intently, and as much as practicable, looking for win-win situations, which you will find in, I believe it's Stephen Covey's book about 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So you see there that there's a win-win scenario, that it's not just about the leader, it's actually about the organization. So the evolution through communicative leadership, right, is a very important thing during managing transitions or managing transformation. And I say this because it sounds given, it goes without saying, but we find a lot of leaders, right, that are not able to, communicate, their thoughts or communicate their vision in a way that actually marshals the troops towards achieving the goal. Some assume that it is expected and it is given that whatever decision is made should be adhered by. But you find out that in the modern day workplace, particularly if you remember where we came from, embracing the environment and the attitude in the household, that with Gen Zs and Gen Alphas and the culture that we find in the modern day household is a culture of collaboration, a culture of democracy, if you like, where children are questioning parents and asking, okay, why must I do this? Why should it be done this way? That culture comes into the business organization. And so you have to understand that in communication, it is no longer a directive. It is actually, right, a collaboration. It's now cooperation. So communicative leadership, where you are communicating this and letting, the staff, or resources within the organization understand exactly why this change has to happen, why we're transforming into this shape and form, why, we have to cut down, why we have to employ such top talent, why we have to spend in this direction, why we have to adjust our budget for this, why we have to strategize in this particular way, why we have to interact with government in this particular way, why we have to explore new frontiers and new opportunities in this particular way. The whys, right, must be communicated in a how manner, that's in a way that verbally and non-verbally shows that the organization is turned towards a particular direction and everybody needs to align. And they need to see the benefit for themselves even in that situation. So it has to be communicated in a form of a win-win. So the leader's work is to think through, right, of course, with the help of advisors and managers and directors and all of that, and leadership, right, but to think through at the end of the day, where is the win even for the least in the organization, if you can use that word. And that ensures, or that secures buy-in even into a transformation or into a change project. The final point I'll then like to talk about as I begin to round up. And again, this was really just to push a dimension of thought and allow us begin to appreciate what it will take, because the Nigerian business environment is evolving and because there's a lot being adjusted for. It will be irresponsible, and I use that word very carefully, of any leader to take a straight jacket, and just decide that this is just how we're going. The ability to be flexible, to be nimble, to be agile, as we say, right, is now a suit that a leader must wear. That agility and that flexibility in understanding that as government policy begins to evolve, particularly government policy begins to change and evolve, you must be nimble enough to understand, where your next win or your next niche or your next, advantage will come from. And so one of the things that I found, observing other leaders and also in my time in leadership, is the ability to, another way to put this is to celebrate your wins, excel together. The ability to excel together and to basically understand that it's no longer a win for the leader, it's now a win for the organization. And everybody must feel that win. It may take, certain celebratory decisions. It may take certain types of engagements to make that feeling come across. It may take, certain deliberate strategies to make that experience come across. But it is important that even in a position of, of evolution, of changing and transforming the organization, excelling together is important. And it starts from even the very little wins. So it's not just about until you get to the big one. You must learn to enjoy the process towards the vision, enjoy the process towards achieving the goal, and celebrate wins at milestones. Excel together. I think that's a very important point to note. I'm not sure how many minutes I've taken, but this is really where I want to, if you like, situate my conversation. And I'll be happy to take, questions that can then, trigger certain thoughts and decisions that we need to take. Thank you very much for the audience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Soji, for your submission. Thank you for taking us through the 3 E's, as I see it: embrace, evolve, and excel. And of course, embracing change and transformation comes from our ability to map out, how the variables affect or impact our businesses. Of course, evolving through communication. I love the quote that you presented on Dr. Victor Oladokun. Clear, concise, timely communication is an unassailable characteristics of good leadership. So we have to be tirelessly communicating, as we transform, in a way to manage transformation. And then excel together. Very instructive and very insightful. That's, transformation and change is also at a point, goes beyond just the leader. And, it has to, be all about everyone, together, excelling together. And understanding that, where your niche is, where your niche lies, and then enjoy every process of the transformation. So celebrating those little wins, goes a long way, in attaining where we want to be. So thank you so much, Dr. Soji Akinyele. At this point, we would be taking the next session quickly, and we'll leave off the questions for after the second session. And I know, Dr. Soji, we want to thank you so much, because Dr. Soji is actually on vacation, but he has, taken up this challenge to be here with us, and we really want to thank you for taking out your time. I know you're on vacation, but thank you so much, for giving us this time to be here with us, and for also sharing, your experience with us. Thank you so much. So we'll quickly go on to the next session as we invite our second speaker, another distinguished personality, I must say, And about 2 weeks ago, there was a formal launch for those of us who maybe had the privilege of seeing it on Channels TV. It was shown live as it came on, and it was a formal launch of the John Odige Oyegun Public Service Academy, which is fondly called JUPSA. So here we're going to introduce at this point our second speaker, Precious Imuwahe Ajono. She is the Pioneer Director General of John Odige Oyegun Public Service Academy, fondly called JUPSA, as Elia said, in Edo State, Nigeria. She was appointed to drive the operationalization of the academy in line with global standards. Her vision is to make the academy a leading learning hub for civil and public servants in Africa. Precious was formerly the head of youth engagement and learning at Joberman, Nigeria. She led the program implementation efforts of the $25 million MasterCard Foundation Young Nigeria Works project, which aimed to upskill 5 million young people and place 3 million of them in dignified work in 5 years, 2020 to 2024. Precious is an experienced change management consultant who earned her organizational insight from working with a broad variety of highly specialized work culture and professions, both nationally and internationally. Precious has a proven track record of leading large-scale development projects and gender initiatives. Her toolbox includes change management, curating soft skills, diversity and inclusion training programs, and executive coaching. Precious earned a distinction in management, innovation, and change from the University of Aberdeen, Scotland, United Kingdom. She received her bachelor's degree in economics from Madonna University, Okija, Nigeria. She also has a postgraduate diploma in marketing from the Chartered Institute of Marketing, United Kingdom, a marketing certification from the London School of Economics and Political Science, neuro-linguistic programming certification from IMI Consulting, British Council World Bank Development Knowledge Facilitator certification, as well as a wide variety of leadership and communications certifications. In her free time, she mentors women, girls, and young people through her social initiative called the Thinking School, where she challenges these groups to adopt cathedral thinking and expand frontiers by harnessing the inexhaustible power of their innate potential. So our second speaker will take us through overcoming resistance to change and leveraging technology and innovation to drive successful organizational change. So hop on as Precious Ajono takes us through the short but insightful journey. So Precious Ajono, you have the room. You are most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. At some point, I was wondering, is she talking about me or somebody else?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to very quickly share my screen. Once you can see it, do well to let me know. And we should have some fun together.
Yes,
I think.
We can see.
Yes,
we can see the screen. All right.
Okay, sounds very good. I'm trying to do slideshow from the beginning. Yes. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is everybody's Kenny. So hi, the people. I don't know if you've seen the movie Barbie. Everybody was Barbie and Ken. So this is very interesting. Reminds me of the movie. All right, my name is Precious Imuwahe Ajono, and I am the Pioneer Director General of the John Odige Oyegun Public Service Academy, a training institute in Benin City, and was set up by the state government to upskill and retool civil and public servants. Today, I'm going to be talking about managing change and transformation in organizations, and I'm going to situate it within the Nigerian context. And what's even doubly exciting is the work that I do is also managing disruptive change, and sometimes incremental, but mostly disruptive, within the civil and public service context. So by way of introduction, there's something interesting that Churchill said. He says to improve is to change, and to be perfect is to change often. You might have heard, depending on what side of the world that you live, that the only thing that is constant is change. And as someone who studied change and innovation at master's level, I know that to be true, both from a life perspective and of course from a theoretical perspective as well. So our economy, I mean, the previous speaker had a lot of interesting facts, and I'm not going to go, he alluded to our population size, talked about households and all of that, so I'm not going to repeat. But we have varied sectors in Nigeria, from agriculture to, our oil industry, to the telecoms industry, that he referenced. And of course, all sorts of different changes. Specifically now that we have the subsidy removal, depending on what part of the news that you're listening to, I've seen something around that we might have a temporal subsidy return, quote and unquote, don't quote me. I saw it in the news as well. But for most of us who are having to buy gas at way higher prices, we do see that there's a lot of change and, inflationary pressure that has happened since transport costs went up in Nigeria. So skillful change management enhances efficiency, competitiveness, and compliance. Whether you prepare for it or not, change is happening. I still recall a conversation I had pre-COVID, before we shut down, when we're still monitoring things in China and monitoring things in the West. I recall being in a business meeting at the time, and somebody said there was nothing that was going to happen to Nigeria. Like, how do you picture us shutting down Nigeria? That's impossible to shut down Nigeria. 1 week after that declaration by my colleague, he had to call me to say from his house, because I was saying to the staff, go get food, go stock up and all of that. And he said, no, Nigeria can't shut down. But he had to call me from his house to say, indeed, the whole world, had shut down. So change is inevitable. But how you manage it when you accept, like Churchill, like myself, that's the only thing that's like Cotter, and I'll talk about him later. That's the only thing that is inevitable. Then you can now start to plan for change. All right. So opportunities lie abound, and there are things that we can leverage even within our context in Nigeria, because oftentimes you hear organizations, young people, and even those of us in the public sector say, where are the opportunities when we have disruptive change happen? I recall being in a conversation with one of the business leaders in Nigeria. I think that was when we just started to have the insurgency in the north. And he was doing a paper presentation, and he ended by saying that there were many opportunities that was going to come out. After what he termed was a gloomy paper, he tried to bring our spirits up by saying that there are opportunities that will come out, and even in the times of these negative disruptions. And I couldn't picture it. I was very confused. So I remember chasing him down after his lecture to ask, what do you mean? Something as evil as this is happening? And he said there are opportunities. And he said yes. And he started to give me examples. And by the time we're done with that 1 hour conversation, I left there thinking, it's interesting how these things happen. So there are opportunities that lie in our workforce innovation, and then the digital revolution that we have, and how we can harness, our natural resources. We talked about agriculture, and we talked about our youthful population, and some of the things that we have naturally as Nigerians. So managing change effectively is going to have a lot to do with the ability to overcome challenges, see opportunities in chaos, and ensure that there's success. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the opportunities in chaos, because I feel like that is a message that is very needed at this time. Okay, so according to Potter, there's so many people who have talked about change management, but he has this his steps change methods that I find that I actually use, and that's the model that I adopted for Edo State. So he talks about starting this 8-step method, like it's popularly called. That's the first thing that you need to do if you're subscribing to Quota's model. There's so many different ones that you can use. There's the Lewin model for change. There's so many. But this is exactly what I've used in Edo, and I'm happy to share this one. So you need to start off by creating that sense of urgency towards change. As someone who was recruited to set up an agency that didn't exist before, the two ways that I could have done it, I could have come from outside. I studied change and innovation. I had a first class in that. And I could say, look, I did this in England. This is how it works. Create a template, shove it down the throat of the service, and then tell them to get on with the program. After all, I have the mandate of the governor to do so. But that's an approach that doesn't work. And I know for a fact, having researched this topic extensively, that it doesn't work. So the first thing you want to do with change is to get the people who must change, so that, quote and unquote, to get your organization ready for change. So for us, it's, it started with things around stakeholders engagement. Who are the critical people? Who heads the institution? So people like the head of service, doing presentations to him, getting his buy-in with his team, the body of permanent secretaries. It meant me going to the Civil Service Commission to have meetings with the chairman and her commissioners to say, this is what we want to do. It also meant meetings with the political class to say, look, we have weak institutions, we have strong men and women, but the minute we have a transition, and then we have policy somersaults and things like that, I don't want to be part of setting up a school that I come back in the next 2-3 years, it becomes a civil service club or something, or maybe even worse, after all of this investment has gone. So what are your thoughts? Are we happy with the way things are? And what's fascinating about Nigeria is no matter where you go, everyone is fed up, including the elites, because it's not working for anybody now. So how do we had to create that sense of urgency to say, and then of course go back to the public servants and say, look, yes, there's potential for corruption. You help some politician pilfer the treasury, and then they give you maybe, I don't know, some coins. But is it still working for you on a sustainable basis? Are you able to give your children the kind of education that you wish? Do you have the right kind of working environment? Are they training you? Are they investing in your growth? What would you rather get 1,000 naira from a politician, or have some investment in your growth, where beyond even being a public servant, tomorrow you could become a consultant for some of these global companies? Of course, you can imagine the things that they chose. And then after that, we very quickly started to build change coalitions. So in setting up JUPSA, the academy which I run, it was critical to find out how training was happening in the service. Again, and I decided to make this as practical using the JUPSA model, just so that I'm not talking in abstract terms, and I'm hopefully telling you something that you too can go and replicate and implement. So again, we could have come and said, this is the template, we've met with the stakeholders, let's get on with the program. But that's not what we did. It was important to figure out who are the people across all our 77 MDAs that we had at the time. No, 81 MDAs at the time. It's now been streamlined to 77, to say who runs training, because I know they were doing training before I got on board. How were you doing it? And we brought all of them. They're called directors of shared services, formerly called directors of admin, and formed them into a change coalition. And my message to them was very simple. We are going to co-create JUPSA, because for this academy to stand the test of time, it needs to go beyond the visionary, the governor. It needs to go beyond me and my passion. We all need to co-own it. So that way, whether I'm sitting here or not, it's a school that will continue way into the future. So we sat down together to review our strategy plan for the next 5 to 10 years, to draw up even things as simple as our core values. What do we believe as JUPSA? Should we be accountable, or should we be agile? Should we be judicious, or should we just be, so what makes sense for the service? And, everybody's series of stakeholder engagement, but now within the context of the people that we call our IMCTs, interministerial counterpart team, and now they're evolving into a community of practice that will continue to work with us, and then hopefully shape what becomes of training in Edo and beyond within the next 5 to 10 years. And then we now started to, now we have our group, now we've engaged our stakeholders, we have our coalition, and then we start to develop strategies to bring about this change. So what kind of JUPSA do we want to build? Oh, I want a tech hub. I want it to be a school that leverages technology to scale. I want us to have a learning management system. And then people are saying, no, but wait up, we're looking at our skills gap reports, and we're seeing that our digital literacy levels are quite low. I don't think we're ready for this. Okay, we're not ready for it in the next 2 years, but we'll be ready in 5 years if we train them and all of that. So that was also at step 3. And then step 4, it now became very important for us to communicate, communicate and put forward our strategy. So we had review workshops, invited other broader group of stakeholders now, not just our coalition, to see how do we, this is the JUPSA we want to build. Does it make sense for the service? These are the courses we'll start off with. These are the kind of partners that we're looking to have. What makes sense? What should we remove? And then we continue to engage, communicate clearly, engage media as well, and, be invited to things within the service, and just any opportunity to make sure that our plan is understood. And then we're also able to take feedback. And then 5 is here we now start to enable your organization. So you empower your employees to be able to take action and incorporate change. So JUPSA started, and we did a soft, we called it a soft launch last year, and we piloted a lot of things, right? We wanted to experiment. So things even like gamification. And for some people, they said, oh, why are you starting with all of this too quick? But for us, it was important for us to also learn and see what works and what doesn't work, so that we can quickly adapt as needed. And it was very helpful. And because we are taking this deliberate approach, you will find people saying things like, oh, this is in JUPSA, this is what happened. And they don't necessarily have to be my staff, because they are empowered, they understand the blueprint, they understand the Edo State transformation agenda, and they know exactly where they fit in and what JUPSA's role is within that transformation value chain. And then from there, I'll just go back. Yeah. So, and then from there, of course, we now started to formulate our short-term goals. So in the short term, and for us, it was within a year, what did we want to see? The first thing was we needed to be established by law. There's no way going around us not being established by law. So we needed to ensure that our draft bill got to the House of Assembly. We needed to do all the lobbying, yes, that needed to happen, to make sure that we got our law passed and signed by His Excellency. And I'm very happy to say that even though I was appointed in February last year, we now have a law setting up our academy. And then we had 5 clear goals of things we needed to do. So short term also, because we want to be a tech-enabled institution, and we know where we are in terms of digital penetration in the service, we've committed the next 5 years to upskilling our workers. So we want to train our people. We want to improve digital literacy within the service to ensure that, at least in the short term, we have people that can use computers, and then in the long term, we can now start to train like software engineers and go even a bit deeper, and have civil servants who come into our government innovation labs to power the next generation of ideas for the service. And then step 7, on the quarters model, is sustain. So now we have launched the organization. We've trained over 5,000 of our workers, together with our partners and all. But how do we capitalize on these gains? How do we capitalize on these wins to make sure that we're not just a flash in the pan, and this is something that is sustainable way into the future? So now in our phase 2 operationalization strategy, like I'm calling it, we are now thinking about sustainability. The sustainability question, our principal leaves office next year, November, right? What happens then? We know that even though we have a law setting up JUPSA, I'm just going to perhaps have to, I think I'm getting feedback from my WhatsApp. Sorry about that. Even though we know we have a law setting up JUPSA, it's also important that we think about sustainability. We think about what happens post this current government. So that's something else that we are quite focused on. Yeah. And then finally, we want to, and again, according to the quarters model, like I said earlier, we want to be able to institutionalize all our changes, incorporate it. We want to change mindset. we want when you interact in the next 5 years with people who work for Edo State, next 5 years of JUPSA, we want when you interact with the people who work for Edo State government, you experience great, excellent customer service. I don't know of any Nigerian, myself included, who gets told that you want to interact with government, maybe you need to go and do X, Y, Z with government, file your taxes or whatever, that is excited to go. You know, you already immediately start to fear because you're not sure of what to expect. So these are things that we hope will change as we evolve. So change in organizational context refers to the process of altering strategies, like I've explained earlier, structures, processes, and culture within an organization. When the change process is midwifed properly, what tends to happen is the culture of your organization will change. So I'm happy to, and I like to tell stories. I'm a storyteller. The other day, somebody came into JUPSA. I wish I could show you our building. We have a brilliant space. And I was coming down the stairs, and the gentleman finished drinking water and he put it on the floor. We have a very clean space. Everywhere you turn, there's a bin to put things down, and then there's signs telling you how we behave here in our organization. And then the person put it on the floor, and I was immediately upset, thinking I had to go down and speak to him. But I noticed that the two other who were waiting at the lobby with him quickly said to him that they don't do that here at JUPSA. They don't do that here. And when I heard that, of course, you can imagine how very excited I was that I didn't have to, as the Director General, come down and tell them that, oh, this is not the place for that. They already understood that it was in JUPSA. No, somebody was telling him, didn't you look at the environment? So that's what you hope that change results in. Transformation involves profound shifts that can reshape your organization fundamentally, and often driven by technological advancements. By September 1st, we are piloting, so we run government in Edo on what we call e-governance. And by September 1st, we want to pilot a paperless government. So what we're saying is, let's not send paper files and things like that. Of course, underpinning all of these transformation activities is training. Currently, as I'm here having this, we have over 200 of our workers upstairs going through training on how to use the e-governance system, asking any questions that that might arise, so that by September 1st, when we pivot to paperless, of course, we expect, again, it's a pilot, that there will be feedback, but we're hoping that with the series of training and engagements, we are able to minimize some of these disruptions. So what are some of the common challenges that we face in our organizations here during change and transformation? And again, I can speak from experience within the context of the Edo State government. There are, of course, cultural factors and barriers. I feel very lucky and to be a young woman heading, I suppose I'm probably the youngest Director General currently in my state, and I don't know if I compare to other states in Nigeria. And then plus, of course, I'm a woman, and those are very interesting factors when you put it within the context of our culture. And then plus, I came from the private sector into government, and that's why it was extremely important for us to go through the 8-step model. It was extremely important that we engage our stakeholders, because what you do, the antidote for cultural barriers is engagement. The antidote for change disruptions is communication, clear communication, and stakeholder engagement. Very, very important. And of course, there's usually the initial organizational inertia. They've come again. What do they want to do? I remember the first time I would meet the IMCTs. In fact, the biggest change champion, a lady who works in Government House, the first time she came, she didn't want to be there. She was the last person to come, and she said they brought this foreign speaking consultants, that's what she called me, to just come and talk to us again. They want us to lose our jobs. They want us to do X, and just skepticism. And the first time I met her, what I said to myself was, if I can convince this young lady of this work that we want to do, then half of my work is done. And the minute she got on board, because she's so influential within her circle, she was able to also convince other people to say, look, this JUPSA, they are not like, they know what exactly it is that they want to do. And of course, change is scary, the fear of the unknown. I often give the example in terms of the way I love my soup. I'm a Benin girl, and there's a local delicacy that I really like. I went someplace and they had switched it up a little bit and they put some curry. This was after I had a first class in innovation and change. I didn't like the fact that they innovated around my local dish. I was very upset. I think I told the chef a thing or two that should never have happened, and things like that. So there's the fear of the unknown. And like in our own context, people are generally just distrustful, especially around leadership, am I going to lose my job? And it's very important for the people driving change to understand the human element and communicate clearly. So if they're going to lose their jobs, if you're going to have some organizational restructuring, make sure that you are clear from the beginning. People tend to trust people who are upfront with the truth. And then having said all of that, you might do everything, and I'm not going to pretend and tell you it's been easy, midwifing change in Edo, like I like to call it. There has been a lot of resistance. I still have a lot of resistance till today. Sometimes I question my mental health. Like, if I had known all of the challenges that I was going to have on this role, I would have stayed back in Lagos and I never would have showed up here. So it's a good thing that I didn't know the full extent of all the disruptions we're going to cause within the system before saying yes to this role. But resistance to change can be overcome. And some of the things that work, I tell you for free, is effective communication. You need to communicate effectively. I had to learn that this public service culture is very different from the private sector, where, for example, you want to self-advocate. In fact, in meetings, if you've not given feedback, you haven't done it quite right. But here you could have a presentation for 5 hours. Nobody's going to ask questions. Everybody's going to say all is well. But if you read the room and you see the body language, you find out that all is not well. But they will go back to the secretariat, go back to their small groups and say, these people have come again. So I had to learn how to be in the rooms where they were, willing to speak freely, and how to ensure that I also was communicating the vision every single chance that I got, together with my team, of course, because I'm not working alone, surely. Involve the stakeholders. Who are the people that need to go? So the first thing we had to do was go to the institution, the office of the head of service, the body of permanent secretaries, the commissioners, the governor himself, the deputy governor, everybody, making sure that there's stakeholder buy-in at every point of the journey. And then, of course, train. Sometimes people just don't know. Sometimes it's not because they don't want to do it. It's just a matter of, I don't know how to do it. So yes, I thought to put a bit of case study, but I'd already talked about it quite a bit. So I'm not going to belabor the point. But I think the big thing from our work in Edo here is that it's possible. Often when people come, and I had to use this example, there was no point to have done the job that I do or do the job that I do and then come here and be theoretical about change. Especially since you asked me to situate it within the Nigerian context. And it's interesting that I'm talking from the public service perspective and not even the private sector, where quote unquote, it's harder to implement change in the public service. It's a bureaucracy. People are used to doing things a certain way. So coming to say, introduce new ways of doing things, it's not the easiest of things to pull off. So again, a lot of communication, making sure that we are, and then I must also say this, one of the things that have helped us is how we are using technology, leveraging technology to scale. The governor of Edo State laying fiber optics across 18 local governments and just making sure that people have access to information. One of the things that you can use to counter resistance also is making sure that there's access. So for example, things like, questions about the transformation. What would you like to know? Everything accessible online. We have our small WhatsApp groups that are very effective for the different groups that I told you about. And whether it's the commissioners, we're all in one group. Whether it's the IMCT, our Change Coalition, now morphing into a community of practice, we're all in one group and things like that. So despite all of the challenges, we are also moving forward, and then we are learning as we go. So it's also important that if you're driving change, especially within our context in Nigeria, you and your team and your organization has to be a learning organization. We've also tried things that haven't worked. And you have to be courageous enough to come back to say, look, I tried this and it didn't work. And I'll give you an example. When we were starting and we were thinking about courses to prioritize, because I got a little bit excited, apart from things like public service fundamentals and things like public service technical writing, I thought, oh, why not teach nanotech and wearables, Internet of Things? But when we brought that to our stakeholders, they weren't having it, go and do that in Jobberman elsewhere. But that's not our problem right now in the service. Our problem is we have people that cannot even write memos. We have people that cannot present. We have people that cannot use PowerPoint. We have people that cannot even turn on a computer and they don't know what Google is. So let's focus on that first before we scale up. So those are things that you learn through engagement, stakeholder buy-in, facilitating these conversations, collaborating. Let the people you are trying to transform and change see that they have a stake in it, what is in it for me, and communicate what is in it for them clearly. While in the knowledge generation, I tell them, through every class. So what you get out of training doesn't just benefit the state government, but it benefits you first and primarily. And communication like that tends to help. But you see, and there's not going to be any transformation or change, especially within our Nigerian context, without the buy-in of leadership. It all rises and falls on leadership. So I often say that JUPSA could have worked or not have worked. It needed the governor to be committed to it, to say, look, I want to build institutions. I want to strengthen the public service institution, and I'm going to invest in making sure that this happens. So we need our leaders to set clear examples. We need them to continuously, like us, communicate the vision and set the direction for change to go. And then, of course, you want to have a lot of empathy for the organization that you're changing. Remember, these people have been used to doing things a certain way. And even with quote and unquote corruption, I'm just going to say something that is very unpopular. When you look at the wages that the people in the public service earn, it almost makes sense. It almost makes sense. You can almost see why things are as bad as they are. Because, I made an argument respectfully that even if you were to bring some of my religious leaders to this sort of context, I don't know that they will be that pious. Considering. So you want to have a bit of empathy. You want your constituents, you want the organization and the people who work there, because again, change rises on, of course, there's the technological aspect of change, but it's the humans in the organization that will drive both the technology, the culture, and everything else. So the human element is extremely important, and it's important that you empathize with them. In Edo, one of the things we had to do was to increase the minimum wage. There was just no way. And I think now we have the highest minimum wage in the country. Our workers get 40,000 minimum. Okay. And then you want to recognize and, you want to reward the behavior you want to see. So there's some people that will be early adopters in your organization, those who will get on the transformation train real quick. You want to be able to recognize them. You want to be able to reward them. And you want to set, so we have things like JUPSANs of the month, people who come to class early, people who reinforce the attitudes that we want to see. And you want to shine the light on those kind on people like that. And like we like to say, you want to democratize opportunities. So gone are those days where you have to be nice to the DG or nice to a permanent secretary for you to be in the room or for you to get recognized. You want to democratize it. You want to bring people from that local government that nobody pays attention to, and then you want them to get a letter from the governor for their service and things like that. And of course, you want to train, retrain, and educate your people. So by actively assuming these roles, leaders are not only able to facilitate change, but you're also able to break the resistance through engagement, effective engagement, and then move your change agenda forward. So again, these are some strategies that you can deploy when working with your employees towards your transformation and objective. If you notice, I cannot overemphasize communication. Everything rises and falls there. And your workers need to be empowered. So there's no point for us to say that we want to move into a paperless government without giving people computers. So it meant that the government had to distribute over 3,000 computers, because you're not going to be able to achieve paperless when the people are not empowered. They don't have the work tools. And that's one of the reasons. And we're saying, oh, we want to strengthen our public service institution. That's one of the reasons why if you come to our secretariat or if you come to the JUPSA where I work, you see that, so for example, my AC works, our Wi-Fi works, those tools exist. I'd heard stories that before we joined and before some of this work started to happen, if a public servant working in our secretariat needed to go to the loo, they had to go to a Mr. Biggs because they didn't have toilets that work. You cannot build culture in an organization where the work environment doesn't work. Because sometimes, and I think I can say this because I'm talking to mostly Nigerians, but just badly behaved. You want people to perform, but you haven't given them the wherewithal. You haven't empowered them to be able to perform. It doesn't work like that. So you have to, and then you have to recognize good behavior. You have to democratize it. You have to be transparent about that process, because the many people smell out favoritism and you are giving it to the people that, some special kind of people, it goes bad real quick. I often say this very quickly, even in terms of how you recruit the people that drive change. I didn't apply for this job. I didn't know the governor. I was headhunted to come and sit here. Is the reason I'm very passionate, I believe, about the work that I do. And perhaps if it was something that was just, I was just installed in the position, it might be different. So those are things that you might want to think about as someone who wants to pioneer change. How transparent can we make the process? So I talked a little bit about digital transformation. You really want to underpin your change initiatives with technology. It makes it easier, it makes it faster, and then you're able to scale very quickly. It's one of the reasons why we've trained 5,000, because we're partnering with organizations, to be able to train online. So not all our workers need to come and sit in our facilities for them to learn. And then again, just finally, I'm closing. I hope I haven't overstayed my welcome at this point. We need to be able to adapt to changing market dynamics. And that's the whole point of change, right? If there's one thing that we're certain about is that nothing is certain, right? And the minute we know that, we have some peace. So by viewing change and transformation as opportunities for innovation, like the gentleman who delivered that paper, on the insurgency had told me, then Nigerian organizations can navigate these changes and thrive in dynamic business landscape. So instead of being a victim, quote unquote, of change, what opportunities exist and how can we leverage? So I can tell you for free, one of the challenges we have at JUPSA is funding. I am building a model where in the next 5 years, we would have to rely less on government subventions and more on external funding, right? So how do we fund JUPSA? What are the opportunities that exist? What are the organizations that are funding public service knowledge? How do we leverage this funding constraint that we have? And how do we think of new ideas and solutions so that we ensure that we continue to be relevant? So I am finally ending. So in conclusion, in the Nigerian context, right, effective change and transformation management is supremely essential. One thing that we know for a fact is that there's going to be, I don't want to predict and say a lot of policy somersaults, but I can say that for Edo's context, especially since we're going into an election year. So it means that even organizations like mine that now has a law setting it up and some governance structure clearly laid out, our SOPs clearly laid out, we still need to think about what might happen should power change hands, and then it goes to say who knows what could happen, and what could happen if technology is constantly changing. So it means that even though we're training over 3,000 of our workers this year on digital appreciation skills, it means that we must continue to do that as technology evolves and all. But what's most important is we must build organizations, especially within the public service context, that are flexible, that can adapt, that are nimble enough. I will end with this presupposition from neurolinguistic programming, one of the courses that I've done. And one of their presupposition is that the person or the organization with the most flexibility controls the system. So it's the one who is most adaptable to change that is in control of the system. So at that point, I must thank Kenny kindly, Perita, and all of you for giving me this time to just be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Precious, for your session. Thank you for taking us, through your experience with JUPSA I mean, that's such a laudable project that you have going on there in Edo State. I mean, I saw the launch, and I was truly amazed that we have such an institution in Nigeria, and it just makes me proud to know that, we have so much talent, within us. And, if just given the chance, and like, Dr. Soji said, just creating the enabling environment, there's so much more we can do. There's so much more. And I really congratulate you and say well done on that project, because it's such a huge project. And we pray that it will outlive, even the, governor that has, set it up, and beyond even this, government, that it will continue to, sustain, through the times. And that's our hope and our prayer for your institution. So well done. Thank you so much for taking us through the Quota's 8-step model of creating, to build, form, enlist, enable, generate, sustain, and institute. Thank you so much. There's just so much nuggets, just, that we can get from, just sharing your experience, on how you, the setup of JUPSA. I mean, there's just so much. When we think about the antidotes, like you said, for change and transformation, is clear and effective communication and engagement. Of course, engaging all stakeholders, team members, and not going it alone. And then, of course, sharing from your opportunities in chaos. I mean, I know instituting JUPSA must have been a lot of that. I'm sure you saw a lot of obstacles, challenges that you had to overcome. And just sharing from that experience, opportunities, of course, lie in our workforce, in our youthful workforce for innovation. So just making use of all the opportunities that we have, that even the chaos presents. There's so much opportunities in there that lies even in chaos, even in chaotic situations. We see so much that can come out of that. And of course, you talked about the, the common challenges, and then how to also overcome those challenges, and, and resistance to change, because of course, change is never pleasant. It's just disruptive, and people see it as being negative. But in the end, if we just are able to embrace it, like Soji had also, presented to us in his session, that if we're just able to, embrace it, there's so much that we can gain, of course, so many techniques, and then of course, train. We talked a lot about training, continuous training, and then of course, leveraging technology for such change, and also to scale. We have to embrace technology. Thank you so much for this wonderful and insightful session that you've had with us. And quickly, we'll go on to the question and answer session. And we already have some questions in our Q&A chat box, and we'll also enjoin others who I know, just from listening to Dr. Soji and listening to Precious, I know you have, some questions that are already, coming up in your minds, and would like for you to drop them in the Q&A box. Even as we begin the session, I would quickly go to the chat box. But before I do that, I would also start off with Dr. Soji. I know there's some questions that have come up earlier, even before now, just before the end of the second session. And I'll just take one or two, and I'll this goes to Dr. Soji. The first question here is, how do you manage the evolution of workplace in terms of dealing with Gen Zs and their impact in the workplace, especially for CEOs who are a bit traditional in their business approach? I'm sure you knew this question was coming at some point.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much. Very, very good question, because it's something that everybody is now, faced with, in the sense. One of the first things you need to do as a CEO, and I also speak not just as a CEO, but as a father to 3 Gen Zs, or if you like, Gen Alphas. And one of the first things you must do is to be open-minded. One of the hallmarks of leadership is continuous learning. So think of this as a learning experience as well, being able to appreciate a new strain of culture right? Where the average Gen Z, they tell you, has a 6-month itch. In another 6 months, if they're not motivated, or even less than that, you know, they could pack up their bags and go, and they will send you a resignation letter on TikTok or on Instagram or via, I'm just exaggerating, but, you know, in the sense that the traditional workplace culture that we know, you know, or that we grew up with, does not exactly apply in that form to them. They want to be motivated. They are happy to, for want of words, speak truth to leadership. You know, so you give a directive, they're asking you why, you know, and that tests the ability for you to have thought through the decisions and the communication that you are making, you know, in an environment where you have, you know, a very youthful workforce. So I think the first thing really is being open-minded and embracing the fact that this is not just the workforce of the future, but actually the workforce of now. Understand what motivates them. They want a sense of collaboration, a sense of ownership in the workplace, and not just, you know, shoving it down their throats. They want to be appreciated and seen to be, I think it was my DG that spoke about reward mechanisms, right? They want to be rewarded for their work, you know, and they want to be appreciated, you know, for that work. So understanding that the workplace is no longer where you just come to and you work and go home. The workplace for them is home as well. You know, you talk about hybrid work situations, remote work situations, and even when you come to the physical workspace, there is the sense of making it feel like home. You know, so if you go to, and you know, tech hubs usually have things like this. When you go to a tech hub, you see recreation mixed with work. You know, gone are the days where you could be penalized for, you know, caught napping in front of your keyboard. These people want, you know, what do you call them? Power naps. You know, they want to, you know, relax on a cushion and have, you know, a 5 to 10 minutes, you know, 15 minutes sleep break just to get themselves energized again, you know, and things like that. So openness, you know, is a very important thing. Openness. Productivity is no longer measured by the amount of hours you actually spend in the workplace. It's actually about delivery, you know, on the activities and on the tasks that have been given. So you may need to also restructure how you think about your reward or your productivity metrics, where the question is, did I deliver the work on time? Yes, I did. Versus, did you show up 8 to 5? You know, and those conversations, I know, you know, could be culturally, you know, uncomfortable, but these are things that you need to consider. So I think, you know, one of the hallmarks will be, you know, openness, and just flexibility to the new culture and the change in that is coming into your space. And then, you know, just from a, you know, how do I put it? From a different point of view, you really have no choice. This is the workforce that exists now. So you better understand them, you know, if you want to get the work done.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Soji. There's another question actually in the box for you, and it says, Sir, I run an educational company, but I have a problem with employees not staying for long enough, even after being given incentives. What could I do? What could I be doing wrong? This is from Danjuma.
Well, I'll also like my DG to chip in into that question. I mean, she runs a public service academy, so she will have some insightful answers to this. But I won't say you are doing anything wrong, and it's always important not to, you know, approach from that angle. It's more of, you know, understanding the context in which your human resource, you know, now wants to operate. So for instance, you know, there's the argument that why do you have to wait till an exit interview to actually find out what is going on in the organization? So from time to time, I mean, I have a culture, I learned it, you know, while observing, you know, CEOs working for them. I have a culture where you know, so we are on 4 floors. I walk to the ground floor where, you know, we call them resolution officers who are like customer service agents. You know, I walk to them, you know, I sit down in the office, we do mock calls, we do selfies, you know, we laugh. And I'm asking them, okay, when did you resume? Oh, yes, are you staying? You know, jokingly, but they get the point. You know, I'm conducting my own exit interviews almost every other week. And I'm asking, okay, you know, what's going to keep you here? You know, what do we need to do to keep you here? Do we need to get you a mattress, you know, or free lunch every day, you know? And they laugh, but the message is clear in the sense that I'm trying to understand, you know, the culture of my team and what will keep them motivated. Many times you think that you have incentivized them, but the question is, you know, and, you know, drawing from an analogy, what is their love language? You know, what you are calling incentive may not be what they decide, you know, to call an incentive. And many times, increasing salaries is not the only incentive. In fact, I dare argue that it's one of the laziest forms of, you know, incentivizing staff, because, you know, with inflation rates, you know, above 20, you know, above 25%, that's going to erode in less than a month, right? So there have to be non-cash incentives, non-cash palliatives, things that you think about. And you should actually throw that, you know, question at them, that what will it take you to remain motivated in this job? What will it take you to stay here and to build with us? Organizations are now thinking about, you know, ownership, you know, stock options, you know, a sense of ownership within the organization. What kind, you know, employee, shareholder, you know, an employee, ESOP, that was called, employee shareholder ownership schemes, you know, and things like that. These things, you know, are you know, intuitive ways or newer ways, if you like, innovative ways of motivating. So really, it's about understanding, right, what actually is an incentive to, you know, the majority of the culture that you have in your organization. Now, why I say culture is because if they're exiting that fast, you may not be in control of that culture. That's what it means. Some external factors may be controlling that culture. For instance, you know, the attrition and the migration out of the country, you know, the Japa syndrome may be what is controlling your culture, right? So you need to understand that, okay, if they go to Canada, can they still work for you from Canada? Does it have to be, you know, a, you know, physical work environment? If you are operating something that leverages heavily on technology, then you may begin to think about remote and even cross-border, you know, employment structures where somebody can manage a project from as far as Ottawa or, you know, Ontario or something. So those are things that you need to wrap your hand around and just understand what really motivates, what really incentivizes. Some people just want to work on contract basis and be able to call their shots. Is that a better model for you? Can you make that work? Because really what you're after is productivity and output. So what exactly, you know, can you move out of the traditional setting to actually get your people to get the work done?
Thank you very much, Dr. Soji. I think I'll yield the floor a bit to Precious as well to make her contributions. And I see there's also a question there. Maybe you can just take it all together. It says, this is from Julius Akumolafe. He says, thank you for the session. In the course of the session, you mentioned that there were about, I guess it's 200 of your workers currently undergoing training. It caught my attention to ask this. What would you say is the difference you have brought to public service, particularly to JUPSA, as regards the number of workers in the regular public service and the issue of duplicity of roles, duties, and functions, making there to be people who show up at work and end up leaving later in the day without doing anything, as it were?
Thank you so much for your question. Just to put in context, we've trained over 5,000 people since we started, not 200. But it's interesting that you will talk about, you know, duplicity of roles, what we call ghost workers. So one of the things that we've done in Edo is biometrics. So everybody who works for Edo State government, you need to be registered with your biometric. So what that means is for you to be able to get your salary. So it means that unless somebody else has my fingerprint, and I think the science says the answer is no, it's impossible to do that. But to maybe other softer issues like when you come to work. So I use my organization as an example. I work with 80% public servants, and it was important for me not to immediately start and then bring people from outside, because I wanted whatever change that we were doing again, I didn't want it to be cosmetic, where I bring all my people from Lagos and then we do this work, and then when we're done, we go back. And then the organization is confused as to what just happened. So I had to do a mix and then bring from within. So of course I've had the time. I remember when I first resumed, I came to work one time. I couldn't find anybody. And I was confused. It's a Monday. Where's everybody? They said, they don't come. Some people travel to their farms and stuff. So I said, we don't do that here. So I quickly gained a reputation. I was sending them back. You can't fire the public servants. Their rules are very ironclad, sadly. Like I said, and I say to them, sadly, regrettably, it's not like the private sector where you know that after your appraisal, you're gone. But this one, especially the civil servants, the Constitution keeps them, and they know the Constitution, and then they come for you. But what I can do is return them to the office of the head of service. So I did that quite often. I would return you and ask for new people. And then also, it was also important to make sure that my work environment was interesting. So I started things like learning sessions. You know, there were free courses that you would do, courtesy of myself. So there was a lot of perks for working at JUPSA, and so much so that the first set of people who left within the first 3 months are lobbying to come back, which is interesting to now find. So you need to give them a reason. And I just have to say this concerning my staff. I think some of them might be on this call. The 2 weeks leading to the launch of JUPSA, I think the earliest anybody got out of here was 6 o'clock. In fact, 2 days to when we were, I'm not saying you should adopt this. It's not also healthy. I'm also trying not to overwork my people. But I think a day or two before the launch, and when I went around at 9 p.m. and everything was, you know, people were working like it was normal. And I said, these are Edo public servants. Like I like to, what has changed? You know, what has happened? So you need to also, from a leadership perspective, give people a reason. Because the truth of the matter is people want to add value. I'm not saying work now. People want to add value. And when they feel over time that there's no value add, you know, there's nothing to do. You just come to work and there's really nothing to do. I mean, my workers tell me, we didn't have anything to do. So you also don't blame them. Then what am I coming to do? But when they feel like they're adding value and they are valued for that value that they bring to the table, behavior can potentially change. So I don't have that challenge in my organization, is what I'm saying. I can't speak for the entire Edo State government, but I can speak for JUPSA and say, I make sure they go. I'm trying to create work-life balance now, not the other problem that we had in the beginning. Yes.
Thank you very much, Precious. I hope, Julius, that answers your question. We also have another question here from Taufik Saudu. What other reward mechanisms can one use apart from the normal cash, public recognition, and the like to motivate our employees?
There's so many things that you can do. And I'll just talk from a JUPSA perspective. One of the things that we are also doing for our workers is training. So there are specific certifications that you will get free of charge, and professional certifications if you do X. So instead of you to pay for your professional certification, Edo State government will invest in you for meeting your appraisal goals. Another thing that we want to pilot, and we're already in talk with some partners, are peer learning. So I want to be able to take some of my workers on study tours abroad, so that they go and then they learn and see what's best practice and what happens elsewhere. And that will be open exclusively to people that are high performers. So there are so many other things that you can do beyond cash. And as an organization, you want to focus on the growth. You know, when I feel personally, I like to work in organizations where I feel like when I come out of that organization, I'm better than when I went in. So there are so many growth opportunities that you can explore as HR people for your workers that might not necessarily be cash, or even giving, because even with the recognition, sometimes we get feedback. Somebody said to me that they have plenty, they're tired of flags, and what they call it. You know, Nigerians are like, it's too plenty in this office, and so what? You know, so we need to come up with creative ways to reward people, but reward we must. Yeah.
Thank you. Absolutely. Dr. Soji, would you like to chip in there as well? I'm sure the person asking the question would like to hear your views as well.
Well, yes, I mean, I agree with the DG. Clearly, capacity building in Nigeria, after plaques, I think we love certificates. So, so any opportunity to get, you know, a good certificate, you know, from a quality institution is always a very good thing. What we've also found is also, I mean, slightly counterintuitive, but giving people a little more of their time back to themselves, you know, suddenly has become an incentive, you know, where, okay, because you achieved XYZ, you know, over the next couple of weeks, you get to work, slightly reduced hours, provided that can be accommodated within your structure. So, for instance, in the organization where I work, because we're in a season of the holiday, season, and explains why I'm on vacation, we're able to take, a chunk of our time, because of, lower level of interactions with our partners. We can actually go on some extended, leave breaks / hybrid work situations. That already by its, in itself is some kind of incentive, because we actually do work hard, when it's time to work. So this is the time to play, or if you like, vacate hard in the sense. So that, and just understanding that there will be pockets of seasons like that. I also had that in an international organization. There was a New York-based NGO that advocates for female economic empowerment. And, they took block of days or weeks, actually, every quarter. And they called it, mental health, mental well-being holidays, something like that. And, the first time I experienced it, I said, well, the whole of Nigeria should go on this, because, we're all battling one form of mental challenge or the other, perhaps from the economic situation. But that's an exaggerated joke. But in a sense, the point was, you can actually incentivize them, by, again, capacity building, but also having some relaxed opportunities to work. Work can be, hard by itself. But understanding that now the workplace is about your total well-being, mental, health, just general health, and even the cultural setting. We talked about the Gen Zs and the Gen Zs coming into workspace. One of the things they value is being in control of their own time versus you actually, marshalling their time for them. So your ability to be able to, show them that, look, you can be flexible with your hours, provided you've shown a greater sense of responsibility and productivity, then we can adjust here and here for you. That's always a useful thing to have.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Soji. There's another question here. I see the questions are coming in, but I'll try to group them. I think some already in the course of the presentation have been answered. So we'll share the slides, and then you can, I'm sure you would find the answers in there. I see here another question that says, I may have a positive attitude towards change, but my teammates may not. How can I change their negative attitude or mindset towards change?
That's
Dr.
a very, okay, Dr. Soji.
Oh, okay, all right. No, go ahead.
I'll yield the floor to my DG. She's
so
currently
no, I
leading
was
that.
just going to
That's a
say
good thing
that's
for us.
a very good question, very interesting question about change, because often
Mhm.
you will find that that's the reality. I think everybody's frozen. So you can't hear me. Everybody was frozen. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay, no, yeah, we can hear you. You can hear you.
Okay, that's
Yes.
great. So yes, you would find that that typically happens. You might have to be the only one who is excited about it. And sometimes, like in my situation, it's not only that they don't want the change, it's also that they even canvass against the change. So it's not, they don't stop there. So they hold their small group meetings and make sure that this thing doesn't work. Again, you need to communicate. Again, you need to build rapport. I don't know if we know what rapport is. In the presence of rapport, everything is possible. So if myself and Dr. Soji have good rapport and we're friends, there are things that I can say to him and he's just going to have a laugh. But if there's no rapport present, I say this exact same things and he says, this DG woman has come to offend me, and all of that. So you want to understand what the resistance, because sometimes when people are resisting, it's because they fear something. So your ability to address that fear. So in the beginning of JUPSA, it was a fear that they would lose their jobs en masse. They thought my organization would be run from abroad. Like somebody said to me, I was going to go to England and bring everybody and then they will not be relevant. And I mean, these are existential issues. I don't want to lose my job and it's valid. So you need to understand what they're afraid of. So in addressing that, in assuring them, in communicating effectively to say, this is not what we're doing, but this is what we're doing, we're able to pull some people on board. And then you that is driving the change, you need to be consistent. Another thing that I found in my experience here is the inconsistency is very confusing for them. So on the one hand, you say this, and then you come to work late, for example. So you say you want to push a new mindset, and you're never there early. So the public servant is even upset, and they don't find those things funny. I can tell you for free. When those of us who come from outside tend to now even be worse than they are, and then you are complaining about them. So they will revolt even stronger. But when they see an example, and this has been, my experience, and they see that you're not just authentic, but you are genuinely wanting to cause, positive change, and you find that over time, they fall, and then don't be in too much of a hurry to get people to where you are immediately, because then they distrust you. When you come and say, oh, if we're not on board in the next 1 week, unless it's a war and it's really big crisis, then that's not what you want to do. You want to give people some time. So plan your change within periods. Short-term wins, this is what you want. Mid-term, this is what you want. Long-term, this is what you want to see, as opposed to you want to see everything at once. It took a long time for our public service to get where it is. I'm not going to imagine that in just 1 year of JUPSA, we're just going to magically solve all problems. So you have to also be cautiously optimistic. But over to Dr. Saji. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, DG. I think one of the important things you said there is about organizing your projects in short term, medium, and long term. And forgive me for the background noise. This is the most silent environment I could find, but it's still slightly noisy. So one of the things you should also do is understand that I believe its energy is not destroyed, but it can be converted. So the negative person, you are finding today really just needs a conversion. You will find out that it's that same passion of negativity that will then become, your greatest supporter when you turn he or she to the positive. And one of the ways I've found out, again, from public service experience, is I know when we hear this, we think of it from the corrupt point of view, but it's about motivation. The question is, what is the need for that person? You need to appreciate that everybody wants to understand what is the need for him or her. So a win-win scenario, understanding that, look, this person now is your greatest detractor or antagonist. How do I get this person to my side? What is the need for that person? Is it a positional issue, right? Where, okay, maybe this person was probably, secretary or PA to the governor, and suddenly you've come in, and this person now, now is no longer, even though carries the title PA, but you are now the more accessible person, or, to the governor. So you've literally taken some powers away from that person. How can you compensate for that, in another way, right? To make sure that this person realizes that, look, I've not lost my power, in the sense it has only been transferred to another angle. Then like DG said, that rapport, right? And even just listening. So communication is never really just you saying, but also listening to that person. Like, DG talked about the existential issues. Many people, particularly in the public service, one of the greatest fears they have with a reform intervention that involves private sector is that they're losing their jobs. That's the first thing. So the moment you can immediately assure them and let them understand that, look, like we say, now they're here. It's both of us. We are here to solve this matter for our state, for our country, for our organization. You begin to, gradually shift, and always celebrate the wins. As leader, as change champion, you are already by default the winner in the situation. But you need to allow other people feel like they're winners as well. So never take all the glory for any intervention. Never take all. That's what I mean by excel together. Let them feel like they also got it done. Even if it means taking some of yours and giving to them, right? Let them feel like they were also champions at this, and that they solved it by themselves. So that collaborative leadership is, I think they call it stakeholder capitalism now, where you're not just working for your board, but you're also thinking about shareholders, the environment, even your employees and all of that. That helps you appreciate. That helps you motivate in a different way. Helps you convert negatives to positives, right? And then sometimes, again, just drawing from DG's analogy, if this is, somebody that is negative, the person is negative perhaps in your environment, you may need to return the person to the head of service and bring somebody that is positive. So sometimes even the culture and the context where the person is working is what may have influenced that negativity. But in another environment, the person suddenly thrives, right? So also understanding the dynamics and the power play within your organization helps who to give a dedicated effort, who to keep informed, who to keep satisfied, and who is low maintenance. Usually people that are already sold to the vision, sold to the transformation project, are usually low maintenance. You just need to communicate effectively with them and they can run with it. But detractors like this, negative, like you said, you need some dedicated effort to particularly understand them, especially if within the power play in the organization, you realize that these are people, that can actually torpedo your reforms or torpedo your, your decisions. I hope that helps.
I am certain that would help. I see some other questions here, but I do know that in the course of your answering the questions before now, you have already touched on some. So I will just acknowledge some of those who have dropped in questions. In Kili Philomena, we hear you, and I believe Doctor has already touched on that, as well as the DG has already touched on that. James Timothy Acheneje, that too. I know just the past answer, I'm sure will have addressed that as well. Bosse Gertrude, Adegbite Damilare, that too, I believe, has also been answered, your question. And then thank you, Salihu Liman, for your comments. Ikechukwu Sunday Ude, he has a question, and I would just quickly read it out. He says, what is the quickest and easiest way to adapt a business to government company in the case of periodic changes in government, especially when it comes to policy changes? Do you have any insights you can share? I guess that will go to the DG.
Sorry, I missed that.
Okay, he says, what is the quickest or easiest way to adapt a business to government company in the case of periodic changes in government, especially when it comes to policy changes? Do you have any insights you can share?
I mean, that's tough. That's very, very tough. And it's a real challenge that we have. I mean, we've seen in one of the Nigerian markets, I'll try not to call, where there was a model. But I think this might just be a good example where people had invested in Okadas and then they were going to use it, specifically, I'm sure I can talk about it. It's online, the GoKada example, because it's always easier to use that. All that investment went in, and this was supposed to be booming transportation business for them, but there was a government policy that now said you could no longer use Okadas as, and by Okadas, I mean motorcycles. Again, assuming I'm talking to Nigerians who already know. And you could no longer use that for transportation. But it's interesting, what did they do? They pivoted and then decide to use it for deliveries. So that's a very interesting model. So yes, we cannot do transportation, but we can do, it's very important if you are going to do business in Nigeria for you to be flexible. Even if you are an employee in an organization, please do well for your sake to have transferable skills. You don't want to anymore, that you're not able to adapt should you find yourself out of job or in another situation. So it's very important that as you are thinking through your business strategy, you are also planning for some of these unforeseen. So what will happen should government policy, what will happen if we have exchange rates? Because these are realities that unfortunately we have to think about. I'm running an import-dependent business with, exchange rates that are not dependable. Do I want to start to think locally when it comes to some side of my supply chain? Can I be 100% reliant on bringing in things from China? Considering that almost every day we wake up and then there's a different exchange rate. So these are conversations that you must have in your strategy sessions, and these are things that you must build. So we can no longer pretend and be shocked as business people that these changes are happening. We need to build a plan around some of these policy somersaults and some of the market changes that we're seeing. It's not always easy. Balancing it is tough. Businesses are going through very tough times in Nigeria, but it's worse if you don't even plan for it at all. It's easier when you're able to build that into a plan as opposed to just hoping for the best. That sort of thing.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, DJ. So the final question, and that goes to Dr. Soji. I know time is fast spent. So thank you all for sticking with us, even thus far. We truly appreciate your time. And the final question goes to Dr. Soji. I know you also on vacation and you really need to go, but thank you so much for giving us this time. So the last question is from Zainab Giwa, and she says, how best can an employee get to bring employers to understand the use of giving employees opportunity of company-paid professional certification as a form of reward?
Thank you. That's a very good question. One way to situate it is, again, it speaks to, like I said, the culture within the organization, where you see your organization not just as a place where you come to work, but a place that equally builds your capacity, right, for greater work. I tell people that you will never know how much you've learned in an organization until you're on your next job. You suddenly realize that there are certain things that you are doing and you're wondering, where did I learn that from? Where did I catch that from? And then you're like, oh, wow, okay, I learned it here, I learned it there. So capacity building is one of the ways that the organization shows love back to you for the productivity that you've generated for them, in the sense. So when you position it that way, it helps, the employee realize that, look, this is a professional, certification that you probably, may not be able to afford, by your own income standards, but we are willing to extend it to you, right? Sometimes you have to sign a bond depending on the complexity and the value of that professional certification. But ultimately, that professional certification belongs to you, right? Nobody can steal the knowledge out of your brain. Well, I mean, there's AI now, but but generally, nobody can steal that knowledge out of your brain in the sense that it belongs to you, you own it. So it's now the organization that has to sell that idea to you, that we're not stressing you by paying for your ICANN certification, or for your ACCA, or for your CFA, and I'm just using the ones that are easy to understand from a financial in the financial sector, or for your CIBN certification, or Institute of Marketing, or things like that. It's not stress. It's more of empowering you to be able to do more, number one. Number two, like I said, is showing love to you. But number three, also, it also boosts the prestige of the organization. Imagine if you went on LinkedIn and you were to look at all people working in a particular organization, and you found, 5 CFA charter holders, or things like that. Those things, make you feel like, 7 people, with PhDs. Those things, are value addition in terms of brand value, actually, even to the organization. So that's that concept of win-win again. You need to let them see the win for them and the win for the organization as well. Like I said, sometimes you may need to sign a bond, right? In that case, you need to, of course, seek input from a lawyer or legal opinion, just to make sure that this fits within your career goals and your career perspective. Because sometimes after signing that bond and you want to exit, it then looks like the organization is being dispassionate, or being wicked, let's use that word, but really it's not, right? It's investment in you, right, in exchange for something. Now you want to divest from that contract. They, it's at a particular strike price. They need to decide, whether they're going to, cash out at that, or, transfer the cost back to you, where you then pay for the full value of that. But ultimately, I think if you're able to position it as a win-win, where the employee sees that, look, this is to my benefit, and this is to my, to the growth of my professional career, and it aligns with my developmental goals, right? Then also to the organization, is to the organization's benefit, in the sense that you have a more highly qualified, a more highly skilled, employee within your space. I once worked for an insurer, one of the biggest insurance companies in Nigeria, and the CEO, was willing to send me to the actuary school, in I think it was in South Africa then. Unfortunately, I had done enough mathematics to blow up my head. And if you know anything about actuarial science, I wasn't ready to go into that depth of mathematics. I would have preferred, investment banking and CFAs and all of that. But this was how much he was willing to invest in me, because I had shown potential as an investment analyst in an insurance company, right? But of course, I didn't take up that offer. But I'm saying that clearly he saw value, and he was willing to invest in that in exchange for my own time, working within the organization and, you know, rising through the ranks to become perhaps one of the most senior people in that insurance company. So it's a win-win, and, you know, you just need to position it as that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Soji. And as we bring this webinar to a close, I'd like to thank everyone for your time, for taking our time to be part of this webinar, this August session of our webinar. And truly, it has been a very fruitful, I must say, session. You know, just even seeing the questions that came through, and also, of course, you agree with me, you know, our distinguished speakers as well, you know, subject experts, I must say. Thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge, your wisdom, your the insights that we've been able to glean from you today. And definitely, I know that, you know, it has been a worthwhile session for a lot of, you know, people here present. And so just before we close, you know, I'd like to crave everyone's indulgence. We just need 2 minutes, just 2 minutes. And that will bring us to 12:10, 10 minutes past 12. And so, Dr. Soji, 1 minute for your closing remark. The nuggets you want us to go away with, that will stick with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. I think I'll go back to my presentation and say that, you know, in thinking about change and transformation, one of the, if you like, softer issues to think about is the context, the organizational environment in which you find yourself. Embrace it. Don't live in denial. Understand what needs, what limitations and what resources you have, the business model and the environmental model you are engaging with. The second thing is to evolve, right, through communicative leadership. It's important. Communication. You need to let people see and understand the vision, and you need to live the vision as a leader. You know, vision here being a loose word for the transformation objective or the change goals that you want. And the final thing is to excel together. You need to enjoy the process and celebrate milestones within that process, even before you get to the goal or to the vision. Appreciate, right, the team that you're working with, right, and let them see that you appreciate them. Excel together, celebrate your wins, right? And that's not necessarily having a big thing. It's a simple communication of congratulations, we reached this milestone. Congratulations, we're at the new month. Congratulations, we just hit 1,000 followers. Congratulations, we just hit 2,000 followers. Even that alone is a celebratory position in itself. So embrace the environment, evolve through communicative leadership, and excel together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Soji. Thank you so much. So we yield the floor to our Gigi, our youngest Gigi.
Thank you so much. I think for me, it's just to say that we can do hard things. One of the things, I think we expect things to be simple. And my favorite book in the world is The Road Less Traveled by M.D. Scott Peck. And it starts by saying life is difficult. And once you have an appreciation of this, you can transcend it. So change is difficult. Understanding that it's difficult now makes it easy. So we can do hard things. So first, it's hard to reform the public service in Nigeria. It's hard to reform your organization. It's hard to do anything that is worth doing. But for me, I would say it over and over, you can do hard things. So go ahead and start. Do that hard thing. And the truth of the matter is when you come at the other side of the difficult thing, you learn a thing or two about yourself, and nobody after that can tell you what it is that you cannot do. So go do difficult things today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this time, and thank you, everyone. I see we pretty much maintain the same, you know, a number of participants from start to even this point. I know some have been thrown in and out, but thank you all so much for giving your time, you know, to this all-important webinar on managing change and transformation in organization strategies for success in the Nigerian context. Thank you all so much, and do enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye. And please remember, we're just a click away. StreetSet Integrated Limited is just a click away, and I'm sure the link and the contact details will be posted in the chat room. So thank you all for coming.